Hello, Xers and interwebers. Welcome to Naive in the 90s podcast. My name is Emily, and on today's episode, we will be exploring growing up mixed race in the 80s and 90s. This is a super personal topic to me, being half white and half Vietnamese, and it is potentially somewhat sensitive and possibly a divisive topic, but it is part of my and others' past and reality, so let's just get into it. Before getting too far into this episode, let future editing me just sneak in here and throw in a quick apology for the audio fluctuation and quality. I'm still getting the hang of this podcast stuff, and I have a cold, so the sound is all over the place and a bit off. I'm sorry, I swear I am learning and improving, and hopefully we'll get better with each episode. So please bear with me, and I truly thank you for sticking with it while I'm learning as we go. Thanks again, and now back to the show. First, we're just going to do a quick reading of one of the entries in my book, Naive in the 90s, now available on Amazon. Sorry for the shameless plug, but we're just going to read a quick passage and then we'll get into the discussion. This entry is from June 1st, 1992. Another crappy thing that happened is Adam told me that he likes me and that I should dump Jake for him. And when I told him that I only wanted to be friends, he got all mad at me and started to just yell at me right in the middle of our class. Just yelling at me, telling me I was stupid and that he hated me, and he called me a fucking gook. My dad, being Vietnamese, has never been a problem for him before. He said it a bunch of times until Miss P told him to calm down and to sit in his seat. I just sat there and cried on my project. He said I was just a dumb gook and I should just go die in the jungle or fall on a grenade. No one even asked if I was okay. I just sat there and cried, ruining my drawing. My tears splattered all over it and smudged the pastels so bad I just threw it out. But oh well, life sucks and then you die, right? He was my friend, or at least I thought he was. This particular event has held space in my mind for decades. From the moment it happened in 9th grade, at the end of 9th grade, to this day, where I'm a 45-year-old woman. So it definitely took root in my mind. It isn't something that stays in the forefront of my thoughts, but it is definitely something that replays here and there whenever I'm triggered for whatever reason. Having grown up in a very white-bread New England town where you could count the Asian kids in school without reaching double digits, and I do mean the whole school, as in our entire high school, which we only had one. It had all of the kids from town in it, and it wasn't exactly small. And if we were lucky, there were maybe eight or nine Asian kids throughout the whole thing, and I feel like that's being generous. And in junior high and elementary school, it was way lower, and I'm talking like 1, 2, maybe 3 kids in the entire school. But having grown up in a predominantly white town, any differences were very obvious. From my dad's heavy accent to the weird food I'd bring to lunch or that we had at home that my friends would try to hide their petrified faces from, or my very Asian last name that no one could pronounce correctly, to my very Asian-shaped nose and not quite Caucasian enough other features, it was hard to feel like I fit in. Even from a young age, I knew I was different, and I knew others viewed and ultimately treated me different because of my looks and funny last name. When I was in 1st or 2nd grade and my catechism class was ready for our first communion, All of the girls had these beautiful, lacy, flowing, poofy dresses. Some even had tiaras or veils. But not me. I had a traditional white house eye and a baby's breath flower crown. And although now I love that I wore that, at the time it was super embarrassing and disappointing. I wanted the same lacy dress all the other girls had. I wanted the veil. I wanted the tiara. I definitely did not want to look different, and I certainly did not want this non-lace pant outfit. I remember some of the kids asking what I was wearing. Some asked why, and some just gave me funny looks. Walking into the church with the other kids, I just remember so many adults looking directly at me, so many big smiles, and so many saying things like, "Oh, look at that." I felt isolated and peered at. Since then, now appreciating that I had this beautiful outfit that my Benoit, or my grandmother, had given me, and knowing most of those looks I was getting were not of judgment, but of admiration for it and its difference and significance, it makes me sad that I didn't realize how special it was at the time. But I didn't. I just didn't want to be different. When I was in 4th grade, I had a male teacher. Now, this was the first time I hadn't had a woman as a teacher, so I feel like maybe that may have contributed to my not thinking any of what I'm about to tell you was weird. I was young and I just simply didn't know any better. Mr. D, as I will call him, was a slim, tall, younger man who seemingly all of the kids adored. Not just kids from his class or his grade, but all of them. Younger grades wanted him, and older grades spoke fondly of him. Right from the beginning, he made it clear I was a favorite. Desk up front, always kind, and even told me how pretty I was with my exotic looks. He often mentioned how ethnic I looked, but specifically Hawaiian or some sort of island girl. He even had a nickname for me, Honolulu City Lights. This stuff happened often, a lot at recess or when I was at his desk. The comments, the nickname. Looking back now, lots of smiles, which I loved then. Like, I loved it. It was attention. But now, oh, so super creepy. Sometimes he'd blush bright red while talking about how I looked. He was known to get all red when talking about women or love or anything of the sorts. So the blushing wasn't weird to me either. Though now, it is actually a little weird. Even if they were just spelling words, like once we had kiss as a word and love as a word, and instead of, teaching them to us or asking them on the weekly test where he'd say the words and we'd spell them, for those type of words, he'd just skip them and give us the credit. So blushing while talking to me or saying these things about how exotic I looked didn't seem that weird. Although looking back, remembering it now as a grown-up, it's seriously kind of disturbing to me and just makes me feel kind of skeevy and, I don't know, almost violated somehow. The crazy thing is, this weird relationship was not looked at as weird by anyone else. None of the grown-ups around either of us ever batted an eye, or at least not that I noticed. In fact, my mom also thinking it was innocent, and I mean, maybe it was, but I don't know, it feels off now. But she thinking it was innocent even bought me a few Hawaiian print jumpers and dresses, which he loved, commented on, and smiled and blushed about. So, yeah, probably not innocent, and definitely weird at the very least. I even gave him a framed picture that I drew of myself in a hula outfit in front of a cityscape for his end of the year present. Again, I don't know. Maybe I'm being overly sensitive now because I'll be honest, I loved the attention then. As a shy, weird, and different little girl, I just wanted love and acceptance. But, yeah, that was a thing that definitely stuck with me about being different. Another thing was everyone assumed I knew everything Asian or everything Asian was connected, or at the time, everything Oriental. And to be honest, all things Asian did bring me some comfort or connection from characters that looked even remotely like one side of my family, even if not specifically me, to being able to buy Miko, the Hawaiian Barbie. And yes, I do see the irony in that given the whole Mr. D and Honolulu City Lights thing, but I loved that doll. And that doesn't take away from how having that brown haired, brown eyed, broad nosed Barbie to play with instead of just the regular blonde hair, blue eyed Barbie or Skipper made me feel. Because it was truly revolutionary for me, and I'm sure for many other little girls of the time. Although I definitely got a lot from any sort of Asian representation in entertainment, in school it was totally different. Multiple teachers assumed I'd do any world reports on Vietnam, any war reports on the Vietnam War, anything that could be rerouted to Vietnam, they wanted it from me. But being the stubborn thing I am, I did not comply. Instead, I did the Korean War and the Civil War for my reports. I chose New Zealand as my country for the big end of year project. I took Latin instead of French too, because the French occupied Vietnam and even that was too close of a connection. Yes, I wanted to see people who looked like me on TV and in the movies, but I wanted to not be seen as different myself. And when people asked me about Vietnam or anything Asian, or assumed that was what I should be talking about, or explaining, or explored, I adamantly pushed it away, thinking if I wasn't blatantly associated with it, I could be like everyone else. I could blend in and just be me, not the me that everyone knew was different. All throughout my life, people have had trouble with my last name or what is now my maiden name. And if they weren't having trouble with it, they were having fun. And this ranged from peers, both friends and bullies, as well as teachers. Now, I can't tell you the nicknames without giving away my real last name because I do use a pen name for this. But yeah, there were a lot of not nice names being said. Some of which I knew were meant as endearing, but ultimately just reminded me how different I actually was and how no one ever forgot it. One of these nicknames I can tell you, which was not based on my actual name, just based on my Asianness, which was used by one of my best friends at the time, and in the book, that would be Sarah. She would call me her little chink. Now, this was never a discussed thing. I didn't suggest it or even okay it. It just happened one day. And I remember feeling like, whoa, did she just say that? Is she laughing? Okay, yep, just smile. It's fine. It's not a big deal. And she isn't trying to be mean. And in her defense, she wasn't. She wasn't trying to be mean. In her mind, it was just funny and a term of endearment. In fact, she actually stopped other people from saying it. In that loving, abusive older sibling type of way, she would say, I can say it because I love her and she is my little chink, but you can't say it. It was confusing and hurtful, but also not hurtful. So like I said, confusing. I don't think people understand just what an impact words can actually have, even when the intention behind them is not malicious. Even when their intention is from a place of love. Words carry power, even if some don't understand just how much. I think my unquenchable desire to fit in when I was younger at least partially came from being mixed. It definitely not all of it because I was just a strange, weird girl anyways, but it's a weird place to be when you're a hybrid racially. In a world where groups, labels, cliques, and such seemingly matter so much, it really takes a toll on one mentally and emotionally to not fit in or belong to a group, to not feel like they are accepted. And unfortunately, that is what happens. Now, don't get me wrong. In my case, neither side, white or Asian, rejected me. I felt loved by both sides of my family. I had friends of all races. But the fact that I was not the same fully, or maybe more the fact that I was different, no matter how much or how little, very much was a factor in my life. Maybe not a fully conscious factor, and maybe not enough that most really don't notice it. Um, but it's there, and I notice it, and I know my kids notice it, and I know other mixed people notice it. Although I did feel loved and not discriminated by my different sides of family, there were still moments of, I don't even know the right word, just oddness, I guess. Like, one of my cousins on my dad's side would pick on how we pronounced our last name, which my parents absolutely Americanized for ease of everyone, us kids and those around us. But it is still one of the pronunciations that is very common, and just because it was different doesn't make it wrong. But it was definitely a spot that he knew he could get at us with, and he definitely did it. Pronunciation of names and other Vietnamese words has always been a sore spot for me on both sides. This is self-imposed mostly, but my dad taught us how to say our last name and other names, which include proper names and titles. He also told us how to say foods and places. He taught us animals, numbers, and assortment of other words. But there was always something that held at least me at bay with really using anything but names and titles. The white people in my life, other than my mother, of course, seemed interested, but it also felt like a novelty and at times uncomfortable or just funny. And the Vietnamese people I knew thought our pronunciations were, at best, also funny, but usually simple or just simply wrong. I was even corrected by a white waiter at a Vietnamese restaurant once. He was wrong, he said it very wrong, but it was just another straw on the sad, unsure camel's back, and literally made me stop saying anything Vietnamese to pretty much anyone outside of my home, even now. I know at the very least my daughter is the same. Even though she is a quarter Vietnamese and very much raised with a good amount of the food and culture throughout her life, she's hesitant to say names and words she knows, or even post an adorable picture of her as a small kid in her traditional dress for fear that people will only see a white girl playing in a culture. And that is super sad because it is her culture. It is part of her and how she was raised. I've also experienced a lot of what I would call inadvertent racism. In today's terms, the wording might be microaggressions, but I hate that term for a lot of reasons. But yeah, I feel like I definitely have encountered more inadvertent racism than full on. This means I experience things more subtly, like being asked if I understand the Chinese characters on a menu, or what dish I prefer because of my Asian palate, or if I prefer Asian men, actually asked while standing right next to my husband, who is very much a white guy, and it was very, very awkward. Other things that have come up are things like, am I good at math? This has been in and out of school and as recent as just a few years ago. Another one, is my eyeliner tattooed on? Because the woman who asked me, her nail lady, had tattooed eyeliner. So, obviously. Not everything has been inadvertent. Some things have been pretty blatant and straightforward. It was not an isolated situation to be where people, usually much older, would be talking about interracial couples, and I would have to remind them of my parents. The same answer always followed. Well, that's different. They're different. But be assured, the subject quickly changed every single time, and eventually I heard this type of talk less and less. And this didn't just happen about interracial couples, but about mixed kids too. Which, yes, I did have to pipe up and be like, hello, I'm a mixed kid. Or I'd say something like, you mean me? And again, this was always met with wide-eyed embarrassment and the sputtering of the always the answer line. Well, not you. You're different. Or, I didn't mean you. You're just you. You're different. Yes, yes indeed. I was and am different. Throw in some generic accents and an eye-pulled face in my direction here and there, and you have a nice glimpse of how life has been, from childhood through adulthood. Now, this is not an excuse. People should know better and ultimately do better. And again, not an excuse, but some understanding. Most of what I've mentioned and experienced, and most of what I didn't even touch upon today, I don't think came from bad intentions or bad people. Well, maybe that first guy, his gook rant, but I digress. I think people only can know what they know, right? Like how once people go through something, they're like, oh wow, now I get it. It sounds both so obvious and so silly, but truly, you can't know what you don't know. Again, no excuses, only a point of understanding. I think talking about these subjects are so important and 100% all steps in the right direction. Change by awareness is real. But at the same time, some things cannot be understood or fully grasped unless they are experienced firsthand. And that just cannot be the case sometimes or in all subjects, even as much as we all wish it was. But here's the thing. Being mixed, although definitely has its challenges, is really special. We get the best of both worlds. We get different cultures and ancestors as our own. We get this innately special ability to understand and empathize with multiple groups and perspectives because we are made of multiple groups and perspectives. And I think that it's not just truly beautiful, but also very much needed, especially in a time where division is happening everywhere and dangerously. Maybe us mixed hybrids are just a reminder that when it comes down to it, it isn't about labels and groups that we can fit into, but that we are all just people. People just living the best life we know how and striving for happiness. That's it for this episode. Thank you for listening to Naive in the 90s, the podcast. Make sure to check out my book of the same name, now available on Amazon. For any comments, questions, shared experiences, contributions, or feedback on this episode, my book, or anything 80s or 90s, shoot me a message over at naiveinthe90s@gmail.com. Or connect with me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter with the handle @naiveinthe90s. I hope you can join me again in 2 weeks for a new topic. Peace and love, my dudes.